Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Friday lecture series, Department of Art and Art History, UNC Charlotte. My name is Eric Watercutty. We're here today in the Projective Eye Gallery in Charlotte City Center with exhibiting artist Sheryl Oring. I'm going to turn it over to Adam for an introduction, but Sheryl's joining us from Wayne State University, where she's the Department Chair of Art and Art History. Adam?
Thanks, Eric. It's been a really interesting time for all of us, as we all know, and not only in terms of how we're learning these days, but also in terms of lots of political and social issues that have been happening around the globe. And so I was introduced to Sheryl and her work probably a year and a half ago or so. And so we've been kind of discussing the idea of exhibiting her work here, specifically at the Projective Eye Gallery at Center City. And it's been really great to learn about Sheryl's process, about her vision, but also about really the mission behind the project that this exhibition really focuses on, which is her I Wish to Say project. And Sheryl's going to talk a little bit more about that. But Sheryl is currently the chair of the art department at Wayne State University in Detroit, but she's formerly from UNC Greensboro, partly in Greensboro, but part of you still in Detroit, and now part of you's in Charlotte. So welcome.
Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to be here with all of you and feel significant from a historical perspective in some ways. Also thanks to Elena in the Dean's office. She, I think, originally connected us. And that goes back to my time at UNC Greensboro and a wonderful program that I took part of with women leaders around the state, and met Elena through that program. So there's a lot of North Carolina connections here, even though I'm working in Detroit. It's a kind of surreal pandemic experience. So the project, I mostly want to talk to you all about this project I Wish to Say, which I started in 2004. I Wish to Say involves me going around with a typewriter. I think I'm going to share my screen and talk while some images are in the background. I think you may enjoy that more than just looking at my face. So I do this project where I go around with a typewriter and invite people to dictate postcards to the president. The project started in 2004, back in the San Francisco Bay Area, when I was invited to do a project with an organization called the First Amendment Project. So this is an organization that deals with First Amendment rights and freedom of speech. And it's sort of a long and winding story, but I think it's somehow useful to talk a little bit about the project I did before I Wish to Say. So I had made this work called Writer's Block in Berlin, and we had actually wanted to bring some of these sculptures to Charlotte, but the pandemic made things a little bit complicated, and that didn't happen. But maybe someday. So I had made these sculptures in Berlin, Germany, as a response to the book burnings in Nazi Germany, and also a statement about free expression around the world. So the work is called Writer's Block. It was an incredible undertaking that took really all of my strength, I think. I created 21 of these sculptures that are each about 3 cubic feet, filled with, each sculpture has about 25 or 30 typewriters in them. And they were shown in Berlin on the site of the book burning, at the Jewish Museum in Berlin, and then here in Budapest at the National Library of Hungary. And then they went to Bryant Park. Let's see if I have some pictures of Bryant Park here. So then they went to Bryant Park in New York, and which was right behind the New York Public Library. So at each stop along the way, I was working with organizations that dealt with some aspect of freedom of speech and First Amendment rights. And if you want to kind of dig further into my deep, dark background, that ties into my former work as a journalist. So my first career right out of college was in journalism, and I worked for daily newspapers for a number of years. And when I started making art, a lot of the work that I was making was connected to these similar ideas that you deal with as a journalist. So I had made this work and was collaborating with a number of First Amendment rights organizations as I showed it. And there was this organization in San Francisco called the First Amendment Project. And they were like, we'd love to show these sculptures, but they're really big. We don't know what to do about them. We don't really know what we're doing. We're a group of lawyers, but we like your work. And could you come out and talk to us about what it would take to show these sculptures in San Francisco? And while you're at it, maybe if you had any other ideas. It was all very like loose, very, very kind of, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I kind of had this idea to go around with a typewriter and ask people what they'd like to say to the president. And that had many different backgrounds, many different influences coming together for me to even think about that. One was my grandmother, who was a secretary in the political science department at the University of Maryland. So there's a lot of universities in my own family. But she had always gone to work, dressed up very, very beautifully in her, suits and wigs. She wore lots of wigs and she wore costume jewelry. So she was definitely one of my influences for this work that I'm about to tell you more about. But and there was also this movie called Central Station, which is a Brazilian movie and documents the public writer who's set up in the train station in Rio and types letters for people. And I started exploring this idea of the public typist, which exists in a number of countries where people need help writing documents and things like that. So I said to these folks in San Francisco, well, I'd love to come out and I want to get dressed up like a 1960s secretary and I have a typewriter and ask people to send letters to the president. And they loved it. And they're like, okay, what do we need to do? So the first two shows, one was at a cafe in San Francisco and one was at a sort of nonprofit theater in Oakland. And they brought in school classes to send letters to the president. This was in 2004, leading up to the second George Bush re-election campaign of that year. And people lined up and waited to dictate their cards. It was kind of an incredible response. And at the time, I had no idea what would happen with this project, which has just become sort of the project that never ends, and it grows and expands in different ways. But I want to tell you a little bit about that first year. Of course, it's sort of impossible to imagine in a COVID environment because it involves a big road trip. But I want to tell you about it because I think for students, it's particularly important to think about crazy big ideas and how you can do them on a shoestring. Those were both things that I had to do at the beginning of my art career. And so I had a friend who was a writer and she was about to go on a book tour and she put it all together and she had lots of places to go all over the country, and she invited me to come along. And so I joined her. She found places for us to stay all over from Texas to California. And we went on a road trip that was about 3 or 4 weeks and typed along the way in various places, like a road stop in Utah. We went to the Las Vegas Strip one night. We went to a rest stop in New Mexico. I mean, just crazy places, the Venice Beach in California. Set up with a little typewriter. My friend helped me. Nobody was paying us. We had very little money. We just kind of made do with what we had, with the kindness of strangers along the way, and did that. And then I was living in New York at the time, and I also on the East Coast, got on what they call the Chinatown buses, so the really cheap buses that go from Chinatown in New York to different cities on the East Coast, and went around different places with my typewriter and a little typing table in the luggage compartment of the Chinatown bus. So that was 2004, but one thing that happened was the Republican National Convention was happening in New York at the time, and there was a big festival. I'm just going to put it back onto the I Wish to Say page now so you can see those pictures. There was a big art festival that was happening that related to artists speaking out on politics during the convention when it was in New York. And so somehow my work got connected to the festival and got picked up by some news organizations. So it did get some publicity that year. And the biggest thing that happened, which was kind of amazing, because this was the first year I was doing this project, was that World News Tonight made me their person of the week during the convention week. And that was really, you know, meant a lot and really recognized the work. And at the end of that year, I was pretty exhausted. I'd been typing like crazy and traveling on a shoestring everywhere I could go, and was thinking about what was going to be the future of the project, and ended up applying for a creative capital grant. And that grant really, I think, secured the future of the project. I hope you all know about this grant. It's definitely something to aspire to. They provide about $50,000 of support to artists for visionary projects, let's say. So in 2006, thanks to the Creative Capital, I'll show you a bit about that project. It's sort of also interesting to look back on. This one, let's see, where is it? Here it is. Okay. So I did a special version of I Wish to Say for George Bush's 60th birthday. And I went all over the country to cities that spelled out the word birthday with the first letter of their name. So it was Brooklyn, Indianapolis, Raleigh, Tampa, Houston, Des Moines, Albuquerque, and Yosemite. And had you know, different outfit for every city. It went all these different crazy places, and collected the work into a book. So that was a fun version of the project. What I found then, and continue to this day find, is that when people sit down with you as the typist, they often, even if they're critical of the person that they're writing to, they have a sort of reverence for the situation, I think, and they choose their words very carefully because of the presence of the typist. So that was the birthday project. That was 2006. And then every election cycle since then, I've done a round of I Wish to Say, sometimes with a slightly different emphasis. In 2008, I went to a lot of college campuses. 2012 was the Democratic National Convention in Charlotte, and I did a big version in downtown Charlotte with about 5 typists. I don't know if I have a picture of that one. I'm not sure if I have a picture of that one on here or not. But then what I want to tell you a little bit more about was 2016. So 2016, I was teaching at UNC Greensboro, and had a crazy idea, which was I wanted to do a really big version of the project during the primary season. So in the spring of 2016. At Bryant Park. Now, Bryant Park was the place I'd exhibited the big sculptures. I liked the park for so many reasons. It's just sort of just a good mix of people coming through the park at any given time. And so I went to the park, and then also ended up collaborating with a big organization called PEN, which is a writers organization. They do something called the World Voices Festival. Ended up connecting with the director of the festival and tying in this giant project with the festival. So by giant, I mean I had 100 people working on this project. We had 20 typing stations set up throughout the park for an entire day. So it was like a marathon event. And 60 of those people who helped work on that project were UNCG students. So I convinced my chair at the time, and I'm not sure why he let me, but we hired a bus and took 60 UNCG students to New York to work on this project. I'd love to show you a video from it. I think it captures that event really well. So it's about a 2.5-minute video, and then we'll come back. Okay, let's see, I make the screen bigger first. Here we go. introduction of I Wish to Say is really, really different. So I've been working with a group of 60 students from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. And the show here today in Bryant Park is happening a couple months before the political primaries. And so it's very timely, very tied into the zeitgeist of the moment when it comes to politics.
Have you ever used a typewriter before? Nope. Nope. Yeah, it's a dying breed.
Dear Mr. Trump, it's okay for you to be the president, but you cannot like make fun of people, cultures or whatever. And you would not like it if someone came to your house and talk about your family.
Dear Senator Cruz, thank you for standing up for conservative values. In a world that rejects political values, I appreciate your voice. Love, Teresa.
Dear Hillary Ann Bernie.
New York City, but in particular, Bryant Park is just an amazing place to work. First of all, the variety of people is great. It seems like a little slice of New York and a slice of America, you know, for that matter. And people are usually really responsive when they see you sitting out with a typewriter. They're often willing to, you know, take a few minutes out of their really busy New York day and sit and chat with you about politics. So it's great. It's a really great way to come into contact with the public and just have a conversation.
So funny that we call them Republicans by their last names and the Democrats by their first names.
That's so funny.
Trump and Bernie and Cruz and Hillary. That's very funny. I hadn't either until I started typing what you wrote.
Wait, what do I say so far?
Dear Madam Secretary, thank you for
Your undying, unwavering courage, strength, and compassion for your country and those who support you. Do that smiley face. I know you can do it on that.
It's almost painful to watch that because it was such a different world. And the last time I typed like that was on your campus in mid-March. The timing was really incredible. I was there right before the campus shut down and did a series of postcards from your campus, which are now on display in the gallery. If you want to show some of those, we could give an idea of a few things in the gallery that relate to this project. So there's the cards from UNC Charlotte. Let's see if we're able to get over there. Yeah, so there's the series of cards from you all. Hopefully some of you were able to participate. And one thing that I did, well, a couple things. Those cards, of course, are going to be sent to the White House after the inauguration. Over the years, one thing that I do is make prints that relate to the text in the cards. So if you don't mind showing them, then the prints. So these include quotes from the cards directly. Now these prints were made in 2018. So these are from earlier shows. I'll just take a second to let you see the prints. And then Adam, I'll have you show the billboards after this. And these prints are about, I think they're 24 by 36 or 18 by 24. They're pretty big. And then Adam, would you mind showing the billboard images if you have those? So this year, one new thing that I was able to do in Charlotte, which I'm really, really excited about and really thrilled because this is something I'd wanted to do for a while, was I took quotes from some of the cards that were typed in Charlotte at UNC and made them into a series of billboards that Adam helped coordinate. So there are 15 images. I think you can see they're really similar to the prints. So the prints definitely led to the billboard imagery, taking quotes and expanding them. So the other thing that I'm doing, and maybe now I'll share my screen again and just show a little bit of how the project is working now. So, you know, the election years are usually pretty busy years for me, and I had a number of projects planned for the fall, and at first it looked like they were going to be canceled. But then the people that I was working with started talking to me about, could we make a virtual version of this project? Could we work in this new world that we're living in, you know, along with the same project, but radically changed. So the image that you see now, I'm working with a group of students at University of Michigan and at Wayne State, and obviously in Michigan as well, where the students are the typists. They're setting up their Zoom screen so that it shows a little bit of the typewriter, and then other students can call in and get an appointment with an individual typist and dictate a postcard to the next president. So this has been a huge undertaking logistically just to get this functioning, and we're launching it next week. So I'm very excited about that. We have, and it will be pretty massive. I think by the end, we're doing 2 typing sessions a week for 5 weeks. So there's 10 different performance states. And then I'm also working with the Brooklyn Public Library in New York. As of today, we're still planning to do a live event outside where we're gonna have all kinds of safety measures, including plastic screens between the typist and the person dictating, and of course, social distancing and masks and everything. And by the way, I'm in a room by myself, therefore I don't have a mask on today, but we'll see. Right now we're thinking we will still do this outdoor version in October, and then they're also doing the virtual version with a group of 10 typists. So it's changed it radically. I think there's some interesting things, something very strange and weird about having a typewriter on a Zoom call. The collision of technology and analog and digital is somehow very interesting. And then the way it expands to allow people to participate from their homes is quite interesting.
Okay, and anyone kind of call in
So for the Michigan one, you have to be associated with one of the universities, but for the Brooklyn one, it's going to be, in fact, it's open. It's already up. I should put a link in the chat. I will do that towards the end. The Brooklyn one is open to anyone, and people could definitely sign up to participate from afar. Let's see. Oh, actually, I'll show you. I'll just call it up on it's on my website. If you go to news and events on my website, there's the Brooklyn Public Library one. And then maybe Adam, you could put that in the chat from my website. It's on the news and events page. Or if you can just find it there. Thank you. I think we're at a point that I'd be happy to entertain your questions. I could babble on a lot, but I think it would be great to hear from you all and what questions you have and anything you might want to ask.
I did want to just follow up briefly about the billboards. They are located, you can see these design pieces by Sheryl on 5 different billboards that are in and around Uptown Charlotte. And I think they're all going to be on display for another week and a half. So if you're driving around Uptown Charlotte, look up and you'll probably see one. And also the videos that Sheryl has been showing, and also the clip that when she was the person of the week back in 2004, that video is showing in the exhibition as well. So hopefully as things start to open up and you all start to kind of come back, this exhibition will be up through the semester. So please plan to come by and see it, or get in touch with us to figure out a way for you to see it if you'd like to come in. It would be great to have you.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, it was nice in a way that you were able to extend the exhibition through the election. I think I hope some people can see it. So what questions do you all have?
I've got some questions to start us off from the senior thesis class. Could you talk a little bit more? Some of the students were wondering about the preference for analog recordings in terms of the methods that you're using, and how that works with like the performance part of it. You know, why choose that particular medium over voice recordings and laptops?
Oh, well, the typewriter has so many things going for it. It has, you know, I sometimes talk about it being very sensual, and that maybe sounds strange, but it is so different than a laptop. You know, you can hear it, the touch is different. There is some sort of smell sometimes that the ink kind of gives off. The feel of the typewriter, the look, the way the characters are very unique and different and depend on the touch. Maybe one of the most important things is just the way it shows human touch. So there's mistakes, like the human element is very present in a typed document. And then of course, when I'm performing, it attracts people. So it is a bit of a gimmick in a sense, like it gets people to come over to me and ask what's going on. So it changes things that it wouldn't function with a laptop.
Do you think that the typewriter actually creates a certain comfort level for people who might want to participate than like a digital recorder may not?
Yeah, I think that what I tend to say is that it breaks down barriers. People get curious, they want to know what's going on, and so instead of being suspicious, I think they're more open when they come to me with the typewriter. So it's pretty remarkable how it works.
One of the students just typed in a question. Do you have, in your memory of this project, since it's been going on for so many years, do you have some particular favorite or memorable postcards that you've typed up or had in your collection?
Yeah, I have many, so it's always a little bit hard to choose. You know, from some of the very first shows back in 2004, I remember this young boy, Barry Wong, who was talking about the supplies that they needed at the schools to function. You know, it is really heartbreaking to know that this has not changed, that our schools still do not have the supplies that they need, but that was one. I went to the Navajo Nation back on that road trip I talked to you about, and typed in a laundromat in Arizona, and typed several cards that I'll never forget that were people talking about how they didn't have electricity. And I just think that made a big impression. Of course, there's so many heartbreaking messages I've typed about immigration issues that people are dealing with when it comes to that. So those are some of the ones that I remember the most.
I know in the video that we have playing in the exhibition, there's one video of you when you were in Florida, in Tampa. Mm-hmm. And part of that video, you actually performed this project at a church.
Oh, so that was actually not, I wish to say. So I didn't talk about at all about that, but let me use this as an opportunity to talk about how this project created a working framework that I've used for a number of different projects. So the similar setup where I have a typewriter and I pose a question, I've used in I don't know, maybe a dozen other projects over the years since I created I Wish to Say. And that was for a public art commission at the Tampa airport. And the idea there was I was collecting stories about Tampa, and the work is called Greetings from Tampa Bay. I typed in a lot of different locations, and then somebody that I knew, this is an interesting story, and somehow these things keep happening, but and there's a long and winding answer. But in 2004, I went down to Tampa in St. Petersburg and typed postcards to the next president, did the I Wish to Say project. And I met this man named Joe, who was a wonderful man. He was working for the Democratic Party at the time, doing like campaigning things, and a very sweet man. And I stayed in touch with him sort of over the years. And when I was in Tampa for this project, I let him know I was there, and he's a minister at a African-American church in St. Petersburg. And he invited me into the church. It was really, really incredible, amazing experience to be invited in and allowed to type stories after this church service. And some of those stories are incorporated into the work. And that project got put on hold. It's probably the longest project that is not completed that I've ever been involved with, but it was a very long process to make that work. And then the project got put on hold because they changed the location. So I was supposed to be in one location, then they changed the other location. Then I was finalizing the design in February of this year. And then in March, of course, they put everything on hold. And it was like, oh no, oh my God, I think this project started in about 2016. But they just are getting it going again. And I am tentatively scheduled to install that work in the airport in January. So that was, you know, what happened there was I did the series of typing events all over Tampa and St. Petersburg and the region, and took photographs, took Polaroid photographs around the region. And then I scanned in people's stories and scanned in the Polaroid photographs and printed them on metal. There's an amazing metal printer. I think they're like the best in the country here in North Carolina, called Image Wizards. So I was working with the guys at Image Wizards to print these on metal. And those metal prints will then be installed in sort of like a big collage at the airport, I think in January. Sorry, that was a long and winding answer.
There's some questions about your connection to journalism, and I think this is a good question, but I'm going to kind of paraphrase it from the students, because I think they're implying, you know, the issues with journalism maybe today, but you know, the journalist is a voice for the unheard or the silent. And you know, if maybe you could talk about a little bit about you know, the challenges of voicing concerns and having a voice today, like how you see the current climate in terms of journalism, and you know, the importance of things like your own projects.
Well, journalism has changed so radically over the years, and I don't even know. So many newspapers have closed. It's really financially challenging for the media to even exist, but ever more necessary, right? Like it's such a critical aspect of our democracy to have a strong media and strong sort of checks and balances of our politicians. You know, this is going to be another long and winding answer. I'm afraid there's no simple answers when it comes to my work somehow, but you know, I was working in daily journalism in newspapers in San Francisco and left for Berlin in 1997. At the time, I felt like newspapers were not doing a good job at covering women, covering people of color, that if you looked at the front page of the newspapers, it was always these white guys, you know, and I would speak up in meetings and kind of didn't feel like it, you know, I became like the nag, you know, let's just say I became the person that was always bitching about something. But I basically felt like ordinary people weren't heard, or that, you know, women and people of color were not really getting a say in the news. And my project was created in a way to address that, to just go out into the public and to try to elevate the voices of ordinary people. And it's interesting because it's like one person at a time, one voice at a time, but then collectively over time, there's thousands and thousands of people who participated, and it becomes weighty, I think, in that way. You know, some people have asked about the meaning, you know, the point of sort of the most critical point. What is the point of the project in a way? For me, it's like that moment when the person is thinking about what they want to say. It is sometimes often a very intense sort of reflective period for the person who's participating. And that to me is the key, the heart of the project.
That's awesome. Well, that's well said, I think.
And
Some of the oh, Adam, did you want to?
I was just going to say, as someone who did participate when you were here on campus in March, it was more intense than I thought it was going to be. I mean, you know, just sitting down and, you know, we all have things we know we want to say that we just, you know, we have our issues and we have our own personal talking points. So you'd think it'd be easy to sit down and just rattle off all these things that you would want to say to, you know, the president especially. But when you sit down, I mean, there is that kind of moment that's pretty intense in terms of, you know, just trying to gather your thoughts and, you know, remember all the things that you would want to say. I mean, it was intense experience, but it was, I found it a really positive one for myself.
Thanks, Adam.
There's a question from the senior thesis class. What kind of advice would you give to younger artists or particularly who are trying to get involved with public works of art or relational works of art like you're doing?
I would say, you know, one thing I've always advocated is some sort of internship or, you know, helping with the project. I've had a number of, like, so many students help me over the years with this project. And what's really remarkable to me about that 2016 trip that I took with students from UNCG to New York, I still know at least a half dozen students from that trip who I'm in touch with to this day and know what they're doing, have helped them with grad school applications or helped them with job references or have hired them again. So a number of the students that went with me to New York, a small group of them I hired to come with me to Tampa to do work on the Tampa project. So when I have bigger projects that have budgets, I'll reach out to a network of people who I've worked with before. So I think like seeking out someone who's doing work that you admire and maybe volunteering or you know, sometimes there's pay involved, but you know, not always. I think at the beginning of my career, there was so much that I put into it, just like be scrappy, like find a way to travel with no money, find people who will listen to you and give you feedback. You know, just do it. In my life, I don't know why I'm like this, but I do flourish when people tell me I can't do things. So then it kind of makes me really determined. And, you know, there've been people along the way who've told me, you know, you can't do this or you can't do that. And that always like motivates me. So I don't know, just finding ways and finding advocates. I think finding mentors is really important. Finding people who will help you along the way. I'm here in a way, and it's sort of remarkable for me to think about this, but when I got the Creative Capital Grant, I was working at an architecture firm in New York, archiving big projects for them and doing my art on the side. And it worked pretty well, actually. I really loved my job, actually. But, you know, there was going to be an economic crash and I was going to be laid off. You know, I couldn't have predicted that, but that definitely would have happened. And I met Hassan Elahi. Hassan is the chair of the art department at George Mason University. He's an amazing artist. And Hassan was on the bus where we went away to this sort of professional development event. And at the end of the bus ride, he was like, do you teach? And I was like, no, I don't teach. And he's like, well, you should be teaching. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't have an MFA. And he's like, well, we can fix that. I was 40 at the time, you know, and Hassan helped me figure out what schools I should apply to. He was extremely generous and helped me with the applications and really just kind of target where I wanted to go. That was really helpful. I ended up going to UC San Diego. And then when I was finishing my degree 3 years later, he helped a lot figuring out how to apply for jobs. And the fact that I have this academic job and run a big art program at Wayne State is really directly tied to that experience of just someone saying, hey, you should do this. And, you know, here's how I'll help you figure it out. So just, you know, I didn't even know I wanted to teach. and then someone said you should be teaching, you know. So started listening, I guess, is important, and being open to change. I've had, besides, so I've mentioned a few things. I was a journalist for more than a decade. I worked in an architecture firm doing work that related to journalism. And then of course now I've been teaching and running an art program. So I've had all these different, and of course this is not including all the part-time crazy jobs that I did, you know. So somehow I think all of these things come together to form who you are as an artist. If I hadn't been a journalist, I wouldn't be doing the work I'm doing today. And so, you know, all those little jobs, even, you know, I was a waitress, like, well, being a waitress is not that different than being a typist, where you're interacting with the public and you have to talk to people in a public setting and be comfortable talking to strangers. That was a long time ago. I was also a secretary for a short time in college, you know, so, I mean, these things play out and influence what you think about with your art. So don't discount them. It's taken a long time for me to get comfortable with the confluence of these influences and bring them all together into one person that I am today. I think age helps, but I hope that was helpful in some way.
No, I thought that was a great answer, and it really connected with my own feelings about my experiences and the people along the way who help you and support you, and you know, even what you said at the end about all of these, you know, different experiences and occupations that we have over the years, how much richer, you know, the more diverse those experiences are, the more of a range of things, you know, all builds the kind of character and personality of what kind of work you want to make. In fact, when you were talking about your mother at the beginning, I thought of a really close friend of mine who discovered that his great-great-grandfather was an orator and a typist for a cigar factory in Tampa.
Yeah.
And he would do that. He was the only literate, you know, person. He was basically hired to read to all the factory while they made cigars, and then they could hire him to write letters or conference with the owner. But it's really interesting, those roles, how they've changed, and but that essential need of communication and the importance of maintaining that kind of one-on-one situation that you have in your own work. So
that's such an amazing story. And I did type a story in the Greetings from Tampa Bay project that's going into the airport about people who did that type of work. So I had heard that. Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, that's, yeah, synchronicity. Another student had a question about, making performance-based work and public works. Could you elaborate on what lengths you go to, or how you kind of ensure success or the impact? You know, I know some of it is open-ended, right? But how do you, what kind of work or thought do you put into ensuring the impact or success of projects like I Wish to Say?
Well, one thing that's critical is thinking through the location where you're doing it. And I found through the years, I found out by making mistakes early on that it's definitely easier to go to where people already are versus trying to bring people to you. So for me, that meant setting up in locations like a farmer's market or a flea market or someplace where people were already gathering, and then insert myself into that situation. Because if you try to bring people to a location where they aren't, it's really hard. But I think success is relative. It's funny that the video in the background just showed this scene from Brooklyn in 2004. And I remember that show really distinctly. It was in McCarran Park in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg, on the border of Greenpoint. And there were very few people who came by, but there was this one person who came by who sent this message, bring my son home. And it was about child who was in the military and who was in Afghanistan, and it broke my heart. It was such a sad card, and like poignant card, and so simple and so few words. And there were not many people that day besides that, maybe 9 or something like that. It was a very slow day. So success for me on that day was like typing this one really emotional card. So it's relative, like it's not just like the numbers, it's also who you meet and but I will say, and I don't want to forget to mention this, I think it's really critical to have partnerships, and I did it instinctively. I don't know exactly how I was inclined to that, but looking back, it was really critical that I had these partnerships with First Amendment rights groups, with freedom of speech groups, and of course with artist groups, and just having these networks of support and of help was really critical. So whenever I needed people to participate or people to come type, because some of the typing events got larger and larger with more and more typists. So finding the people through these networks, et cetera, was really important. And building those bridges, having people involved in, like, you're not going to do it yourself. Like, there's no way this work functions as a single artist. So it might be my idea, but now I feel in a way that there's some amount, I'm sort of turning the work over to the students in Michigan. There's like, I think about 20 students who are typists. We're trying to do this massive outreach and try to get maybe like 1,000 students from across these 2 university campuses involved. And that was important to me, to record student voices at this particular moment in history. There's so much going on that affects young people. And so, you know, the networks involved to even make that happen on a, you know, a university campus was really tremendous. So just, it really involves this type of collaboration with other people, with other organizations. Critical.
Are you able to do one more question?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is from my colleague Heather. She wonders if you could talk a little bit about the contemplative aspects of dictating a letter, be it typing or handwriting, versus the speed and reactiveness of social media. Have you found it shifts the way you use social media, or the way your students who participate in the projects use social media?
Well, let me start with just the act, the typing act, because I had started to talk a little bit about that. It is a much slower process than, of course, tweeting or posting something on Instagram. There's, I think, some reflection on both the part of the typist, but also the part of the participant, really a lot on the part of the participant. And in terms of how it affects how I use social media, I mean, I've been posting cards. I haven't been able to keep up as much as I would like. Like the pace of the work has gotten really fast, partly because the project is expanding. So I'm not posting every single card, but I will post cards as I can. And it's, yeah, I'm trying to think, there's things that I need to reflect on a little bit more in terms of the technology. The relationship of the work to technology is a big theme, especially as it's going into a Zoom platform, and the way it just changes the nature of a Zoom call to have a typewriter there. It's somehow, I don't know exactly why. But
yeah, I'm curious, is there some video of that on your website as well?
I don't have video of it on yet, but there's just the one photograph. I will eventually put some video though. We're going to be recording the Zoom calls, or some of the Zoom calls, with the participants' permission. So that is one way it's changing it radically, because when I am typing in public, I've typically held off from having a camera crew there. I considered it, and I have done it occasionally, but I found it to be intrusive. And so I haven't done a ton of video of, you know, all of the shows. I mostly stick with still photography, which somehow always felt less intrusive. But with Zoom, it's easy to record, and we're asking people's permission to record and to include their videos in future shows. So I'll have a vast amount of material that is different from the past shows to, you know, dive into after this fall. So there's ways it's really changing, and it will be interesting to see where that goes, I think.
Well, I think too, kind of related to that, I think that kind of speaks to what we were talking about earlier about the intensity of the moment for the sitter. Because, I mean, people say, you know, they type all kinds of stuff on social media, right? It's easy to do because you're essentially kind of physically removed from everything that you're saying. But when you're in front of someone and you're, you know, they're transcribing what you're saying as you say it, I mean, there's a certain amount of vulnerability maybe there that isn't with social media, which then intensifies, you know, that interaction between the two people.
Definitely. Were there any other questions?
Oh, there's so many. Let's see. One of the students was interested in, you know, the in the years of doing, I wish to say, and there's other similar questions like this, so I'll try to group a few of them together. But the idea of like the range of people and voices, when you do this project, and I think this is maybe what the students are suggesting, it seems, you know, like something that would, you know, possibly be more of have more of a liberal stance. So what kind of you know, do you get a variety of voices? What are some of the political and you talked a little bit about social and economic issues, but yeah, if you could address some of the dynamic maybe that the project has faced politically, or what kind of voices you have.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I understand that, but the premise of the project is definitely that anyone can participate and that we'll type up whatever anyone has to say. I have found, especially maybe since the Trump election, that there's more critique than support. But you know, like for instance, 2004, I set up in New York, right near the Republican National Convention. It was interesting because people thought that I was maybe a convention representative. You know, that particular year was really fascinating because I went to different locations around New York. So I was right near the convention center where it was happening, and people thought that I was a Republican taking notes about the convention. And then I went up to Harlem and was on the streets of Harlem, and everyone thought I was a protester. So it was like within the same frame, same city, but different locations, different contexts, people read it differently. But I remain neutral, and I do think my journalism training there affects that, but I'm very kind of, I don't react to things one way or another when I'm typing, and can listen to anything people have to say. I think that also may have to do with where I grew up. I grew up in North Dakota, of all places, and it's a pretty conservative state. My parents were pretty liberal, but everybody around us, it seemed, were pretty conservative, and it just, you had to sort of be able to get along with everybody. There was no way you could kind of just be so in one area, but it did sort of enforce this idea of listening, and I think that came from journalism as well.
Yeah,
but this, I do think over time, you know, the project has, it does have the radical idea of listening to people who are disenfranchised and listening to students. I think this year has become really important to me, and I'm working on campuses with very diverse populations, and listening to those voices has been a critical aspect of this project.
Right, and that's, yeah, I mean, I think just like any art, you know, I apologize, I wasn't suggesting that you weren't, you know, remaining neutral. You're clear about that. And yeah, I was definitely coming about it from the questions that the students were asking and from my own personal bias. But yeah, that's a great answer, good response. One last one, I think, and then we can wrap up. It's kind of a simple question. How did you gravitate towards performance and these kinds of interactive works rather than, anything else? I mean, you talked about your kind of experiences getting to grad school, but, why not, photography or painting, something more static? What led you to these kind of performance interactive works?
Well, there's a long answer and a short answer, but maybe the short answer. I mean, I can't paint and I can barely draw, so those are media that are out of bounds for me. But I do pretty much everything else, so it really depends on the project. I do photography, I do some video, I do printmaking, make book arts, do performance, make sculptures. But it all depends on the project and what I'm trying to say and how I'm trying to say it. So in this particular project, it really stems from that idea of the typist, which connects to my personal history, which connects to my journalism history. And so it wasn't like I said, I want to become a performance artist. It was, I want to type postcards to the president. How am I going to do it? It became this whole thing. And then I've used it in other frameworks, but I'm not doing, at least so far, I haven't been doing performances that aren't incorporating this framework. So it's really, really tied to my history, my personal history, my professional history, and all those things coming together to make me do this in a way. Like some people have asked, is it me typing or is it a character? I tend to think of it as a bit of both, but it is more of a character. When I'm typing, I'm different than when I'm just talking to you right now. So there's a character involved to a certain extent, but I'm not doing performances without a typewriter, really. So it's very dependent on that particular framework, I guess. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and I mean, I think too, I think of the use of the typewriter, especially in the case of the prints, on that, 18 by 24 sketch paper, those are drawings, the way the mark and the impact of the typewriters enlarged. So I guess that's a different tangent or discussion, but I see you using the typewriter as a mark making tool, as an aesthetic.
I'm so glad you said that, because as soon as I said that, I was like, I've thought that before too, and I haven't really talked about it much, but absolutely, the typewriter is sort of my pencil or my drawing instrument. And especially if you look at the work in the gallery, I hope some of you will have a chance to go in, because it doesn't translate so well on video, but there's this new work, and maybe this is a good place to wrap it up. When the pandemic started, I started typing a word a day and posting them on Instagram. And those words are in the gallery with string attached. It's a little strange to describe, but there's these series of words. And the first word was connect. I tried to type every day a word that related to how I was feeling or what I was thinking about. And it was a very interesting public-private discussion. And maybe that's sort of an interesting thing for me to think about moving forward. I was trying to do something that was private, but then I was posting it on Instagram. So it had this tension between public and private. And then the last message of that series, which was never, there was no reason that it was the last one, but it ended up being the last one, was suicide. And it was typed on the 10th anniversary of my brother's suicide. And I talked a bit in the posting about that, because I think this is such a fragile time for so many people. And because I've experienced suicide on the campuses where I've taught, with students and with faculty. And so it's been a huge thing that's happened in my life over the past decade, being around suicides. And I think that this is a really big issue on university campuses that isn't always discussed. And so I use that opportunity to share something really personal in this public realm and got really a ton of response. So many people writing to me about similar issues that they'd faced, or sharing that they had also been around people who had killed themselves and the impact that had had on their lives. When we put this in the gallery, I said to Adam, I have these typed words. I think they should go in the gallery, and very sort of intuitively wanted to connect them sort of with this like red string as showing the connections between the words, between the days, the way the days kind of went in this weird surreal fashion. Time became very surreal, still is super surreal. And that work is an attempt to reflect the time. And I think it's placed in the gallery across from the prints that you saw, the big prints. So the big prints are very public sentiments to a president, and the small typed words are these kind of private reflections on what's happening. So there's a public-private dynamic also in how they're placed in the gallery. And I'm winding around to this because it also relates to drawing, the words as a form of drawing, but then of course the string is like a drawing. And maybe I'll end by telling you that in 7th grade, I had the same teacher for art and for typing. So I learned to type in a class, and I learned on an IBM Selectric, and I was really good at typing and I sucked at drawing. And I just remember I got a really bad grade because I couldn't draw a horse, but I got a really good grade in typing because I could type really well. So sometimes it's just like going with what you're good at, and where where your skills are. Of course, it's good to challenge yourself too. And I wish I could draw better than I can, but.
I think that's a great anecdote. Yeah, I had to take typing over art classes because my mom was a secretary as well, and it ended up serving me well when I got to college because I could. It was an extra income to type everybody else's papers because I was fast enough at it. So I ended up appreciating it in the end. Yeah.
Well, typing is a really great skill. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and I keep telling her she really has to learn how to type because it just makes your life easier in so many ways if you can type fast.
True. Thanks so much, Sheryl. This was wonderful, and I love the show, and it's been great to talk with you. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.